We'll take just a moment to thank you, the elders, of course, and all of you for allowing me a little time away over the past few weeks. It was a good period of time of rest and recharging. Glad to be back with you today. It lasted a little longer than I had originally intended due to whatever this is that I picked up a few days ago. I will, in the interest of full disclosure, I am preaching under the influence of Benadryl this morning. So take that into account as you need to. There is a deceptive but yet effective move that great athletes often use to their advantage in sports like football and basketball. I'm talking about the no-look pass. The reason it's so effective is because it's unexpected. What we expect to happen is for the person to throw the ball in the direction that he's looking. With the no-look pass, they're looking one direction and throwing it a different direction. And when it's executed well, it works well. But it's unexpected because our experience from the time that we were very young, our experience teaches us that you have to see the target to hit the target. Now, of course, with the no-look pass, if you'll allow me to digress, they do see the target. They've just looked at it a little earlier than when they actually pass the ball. But it's deceptive and effective. Now, as we think about being disciples of Jesus, and this is a series of lessons that we've done a few so far this year. We'll have a few more before the year is over. We'll come back to this topic. When we think about the heart of a true disciple, we recognize that being a follower of Jesus is not a game, and hopefully we'll be able to see, if we don't see it already, that we can't rely on being a disciple of Jesus. We can't rely on the no-look pass. We can't rely on deception to get us where we want to be. And we certainly can't walk through life blindfolded because we'll miss the target. To be a true disciple of Jesus Christ, we have to have our eyes in the right place. We have to have our focus in the right place. And in the text that we're going to explore this morning from Colossians 3 that Dean read a moment ago, Paul encouraged Christians, people like you and me, to keep their eyes focused on the right things. And so let's take just a few minutes to explore what Paul told them. And we'll do it under these headings. In the first place, a disciple of Jesus looks up. A disciple of Jesus looks up. Notice what Paul says in verses 1 and 2 of Colossians 3. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things that are on earth. When you look at the first part of that verse where he says, if then you've been raised with Christ, that takes us back a few verses into chapter 2, specifically verse 12, where Paul writes about how we were buried with Christ in baptism, and we were also risen with him through faith in the working of God who raised him from the dead. So he uses that language of being buried with Christ and raised with him. And then you get to chapter 3, verse 1, and he comes back to that thought and he says, if that's the case, if you have been raised with Christ, then seek those things that are above. So if you've been united with Jesus, then that new relationship with Jesus will affect what we look at. It will affect where our focus is. It'll affect how we view life and how we view the future. It affects what we see. And so, Paul says, the way it affects what you see is you look up. If you've been raised with Christ, if you are a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, then you're going to look up. You'll seek the things that are above, to use his language. You'll set your mind on things that are above. And when we look upward, we are fixing our eyes on Jesus. Seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. So that concept, that idea of fixing our eyes on Jesus, fixing our gaze on things that are above, reminds me of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. Since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, the writer there says, let's lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, setting your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So when we talk about this heart of the true disciple, if our hearts are where they should be, if we've been raised with Christ, we'll have an upward look. Now, that doesn't mean, incidentally, that we are to give no thought at all to anything that is physical or anything that is on this earth. That wasn't Paul's intention. As a matter of fact, if we have our eyes focused on Jesus, if we do set our minds on things above, that is naturally going to cause us to focus on some things that are here in this life. Is it not part of being a disciple of Jesus to be a good neighbor? To be a good husband and father, good wife, good mother? And doesn't that involve interacting with people here and showing our love through our actions here? Well, certainly all of that's true. What Paul wants us to do is to make sure that we're keeping in mind which of these realms is most important. And to always view the temporal, to view the things that are here against the backdrop of the eternal. In other words, the things that we do here need to be motivated by the fact that our gaze is on Jesus. And how would He have me to live? How would He have me to interact with people here? What would He have me to do? That's really the point that I think Paul's getting at. Similar to what Jesus said in Matthew 6, 19 and 20, not laying up for yourselves treasures on earth, but laying up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Seeking first the kingdom of God. Matthew 6, 33. I think it's the same thing Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 to 18, a text that we're exploring in another series of lessons that we're coming back to periodically, where he says, therefore we don't lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. This light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. As we look, notice it, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. The things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. That's what he's talking about. Keeping your focus on the eternal and viewing the temporal through the lens of the eternal. That's what a disciple of Jesus will do. He'll look up. We can become so busy and fill our days with so many things of lesser importance that our focus becomes more earthly than it is heavenly. And if we do that, it may lead us to want to stay here more than we want to go there. That's what we need to guard against. A disciple of Jesus looks up, but a disciple of Jesus also looks in. He also looks in. Taking us back to our text, Colossians 3, look at verse 3. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When a person becomes a Christian, when you are raised with Christ, Colossians 3:1, your assessment of yourself changes, or at least it should. Because the child of God, the follower of Jesus, will look at his inner self differently. Paul used that language. He says, you died. Now, obviously, he's not talking about physical death. So he's talked about how you've been raised with Christ. So you've been raised from the waters of immersion with Jesus Christ, and now your focus is upward, but you also look inward and you recognize that a death has taken place in your life. Not a physical death, but a death to the old way of life. You're to consider yourself to be dead to walking in sin, but alive to being a follower of Jesus and living a life that is wrapped up in Him. Now, Scripture uses this language in other places. How about Romans chapter 6? Paul says or asks, are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? Well, his answer to that is no, not at all, by no means. But then notice the rhetorical question that he asked. How can we who died to sin still live in it? So the old idea about let's continue in sin that we may get more grace, Paul says, no, it doesn't work that way because you died to sin. And if you're dead to sin, how can you continue to live in it? Well, the answer is you can't. And so he says a few verses later, so you also must consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. That affects how you think about life. That affects how you view yourself. We are to consider ourselves dead to sin. Paul would use this language in Galatians 2, I've been crucified with Christ. So what does it mean on a practical level to consider ourselves dead to sin? Any of you ever watched Shark Tank? Okay, a few. Well, one of the guys on Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, he calls himself. The concept in Shark Tank is people come with ideas, but they need money to be invested in their ideas to hopefully start a company, a business, or something like that. And so they come in and they make their presentation before the sharks. These are rich people that are investors. And Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, is one of these investors. Well, if he doesn't like your idea, or he doesn't think it's worth investing in, he'll tell you in very clear language. Or if he makes an offer to invest in this idea and the person that's looking for the investment declines his offer, one of the things that he's famous for saying to that person is, okay, you are dead to me. You're not going to take my offer, you're dead to me. What does he mean by that? Well, he means, that's it. I'm through with you. I have nothing more to say to you. I have nothing more that I want to interact with you about. You are dead to me. When we come up out of that water, That should be our attitude towards sin. You are dead to me. Or, put it maybe more accurately, I am dead to it. I want nothing more to do with it. It has nothing that I want. It has nothing that's good for me. I'm dead to it. I've used the example before about physical death and physical appetites. Right? A person who dies physically is no longer attracted to the physical appetites that attracted them when they were alive. You like chocolate cake or chicken fried steak or whatever, you die physically, those old cravings and appetites have no sway over you anymore. Why? Well, because you're dead to those things. That's how it's supposed to be with us towards sin when we are a true follower of Jesus. We look at sin, we look at temptation, and our attitude should be, I am dead to that. I want nothing more to do with it. That's how Paul describes this inward look. So when we look at ourselves, we look at ourselves as being dead to sin, but alive unto God. Paul puts it this way back in our text, you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Back to Galatians 2:20, Paul further explains, I've been crucified with Christ, yet I live. Right? So a death has taken place, but there's also still life. The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. So even though Paul was crucified, he still lived, but he didn't live for himself anymore. He was dead to an old selfish way of living, sinful indulgence, dead to that, but alive to faith in Jesus. His life was now hidden with Christ in God. That was his focus. In 2 Corinthians 5:14, Paul said Jesus died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but instead live for him who for their sakes died and was raised again. So when we look inward at ourselves, that's what we should see, is a person who is dead to sin, no longer living for self, but living for Jesus, who died for our sakes. And so we have now denied self, Luke 9:23, crucified self, Galatians 2:20, put to death the old man, Colossians 3:9. And so now, for me to live is Christ, Philippians 1:21. Paul would say it this way in 1 Corinthians 6:19, you are not your own. And so when we think like that, when we recognize that it's as if I don't exist anymore in a sense, and a part of me doesn't, because a part of me has been put to death, then life is no longer about me. Life's about him. That's what a true disciple of Jesus sees when he looks inward. And that kind of thinking will make a difference in how we live. We'll stop thinking about just doing the minimum requirements to get by. We'll stop giving God the leftovers of our time and our energy. Our lives are hidden. It's as if I'm not even visible anymore. It's all about Jesus. A disciple of Jesus looks up, he looks in, but he also looks ahead. Notice the forward look in verse 4. When Christ, who is your life, appears, you also will appear with him in glory. You see, we look forward to that day when he appears. With each passing day, this life is moving us forward, ever closer to the next life. And as we move closer to that day, our anticipation of that day should grow. Peter wrote in 2 Peter 3:11 and 12, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, he was talking about this physical material creation. What sort of people ought you to be in lives of holiness and godliness, waiting for and hastening the coming of the day of God? Hastening? You know what that word means? It means hurry up. As we think about what's going to happen in the future, when God decides to bring to an end this life and this existence, Peter says, number one, you ought to think about how you should be living, right? What manner of persons ought you to be? But he also talks about how we wait for and we hasten. We try to hurry it up. Not that we literally can do that, but it's the attitude of wanting it to hurry up and get here. Now, don't misunderstand me. I love my life here. I love my friends, love my fellow Christians, love you, my church family. But you know, my love here is still affected by my sin. My love's imperfect. So is yours. Because we still battle the flesh. We still battle temptation. So the love that we have, as great as it is here, is still imperfect. So I'm ready whenever the Lord is to experience life with fellow saints in a perfect place. That's why Paul would say, I'm hard-pressed between the two. Between the two what? Well, his desire to depart and be with Christ on the one hand, and his desire to stay among his brethren and work among them on the other hand. And he recognizes that to depart and be with Christ is far better. I'll take far better any day. So where is your focus today? What are you looking at? And don't say, I'm looking at that preposition you just dangled. I'm speaking colloquially. What are you looking at? Where's your focus? Is your focus from day to day only on the here and now? Are the only treasures you have the material ones that are associated with this life? The heart of a true disciple of Jesus is a heart that looks upward, it looks inward, and it looks forward. And so when it comes to spending eternity with Jesus, you can't no-look pass your way there. You have to see the target to hit the target. Are you looking at the target? If you're not, there's no better time than right now to take your focus, your gaze off of whatever else it's on right now and lift it up and put it on Jesus. And if we may help you do that today, we invite you to respond to the invitation. Let us stand and sing.